So it's about like, all right, what skill sets do I need to develop so that I can go out and do better and be efficient, right? Like, I always talk about the parable of the talents, right? Like God gave, these talents, and he was like, hey, like, do something with that. Don't just bury it. Don't just sit on the couch and like scroll, okay? Double it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the I'm Telling God About This podcast. We have an awesome show for you guys today. We are doing our first interview. As some of you who've been with us for a while may realize, we've been at this now for almost a full year. I think we started in January. And so one of the things that we're super stoked about is moving into incorporating interviews into our show. So if that's something that interests you, please comment, like, and subscribe. So we got our first victim. We had to warm up into this. So picked an old friend, Keller Hopkins, and we picked a topic that we're all very passionate about, but that Keller's just like the right guy to have for this. Keller is a jack of all trades, like Geardo, doer of things, maker of stuff, solver of problems. But what really wanted, the main reason we wanted to get him in was because of his experience with disaster relief. And, we wanted to talk more about prepping. If you have been listening and you heard our last episode we did on Helene, we covered a couple little things. We kind of talked about it tangentially. But Keller, while we were goofing off and filming a podcast episode, was knee deep in what was going on in Helene. Keller has made a habit of just packing up and going, where people need support. And that's because of the way he grew up. There's a bunch of really cool things. I'll let him talk about that. But yeah, so Keller's been around. Josh and Nick and all of us, we've known each other from Lynchburg back in the day. So yeah, Keller, welcome.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
To the I'm Telling God About This podcast. So I gave you a little bit of an introduction, but why don't you kind of give the audience a little bit of an introduction of yourself and kind of what you're doing now and kind of how you got into all this.
Okay. Well, I live in Lynchburg, Virginia, but I've lived around I've traveled quite a bit and lived different places. I'd started a tree service business a few years ago and really felt like we wanted to get more into, kind of living out the mission, right? The mission that we're all on, right? And that's to make disciples and to go into all the world and like love our neighbor, essentially. And so we were trying to figure out how to do that. And then we started talking to missionaries, and all these missionaries were like, well, we have this routine and we do this and then that and that. And they were like so like sorted. And I was just like, dang, man, I don't know if we could like consistently do that. And so we were like, what are we going to do if we want to like go and do missions and stuff? And then one of the missionaries we talked to were like, you should look into Samaritan's Purse's chainsaw teams. And I was like, chainsaw teams? Like, that sounds like right up my alley.
Chainsaw team just sounds so epic.
That sounds amazing. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Dude, they have like a NASCAR trailer and it's got like screen print all over the side with like dudes with chainsaws and like cutting and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Dude, you just totally glazed, like, okay. You completely glossed over how he starts with saying, hey, I've got this chainsaw business. Okay. Let's talk about how you got into the chainsaw business. Because you can pick this up, but what I remember was there was a tornado that took place.
Yeah.
And somebody went to one of our old friends, I think it was one of the Jonas brothers.
Oh, that's right.
And decided, I think I'm going to, hey man, I'm going to go clean up some trees. Can I like borrow your tree equipment and like your chainsaw?
Do you guys know Ben Jonas? So he had these old like lineman spikes, and everything was so rotted out on him that he had just replaced it with dog collars. So he literally like duct taped dog collars to like the stuff that would strap around your calf and your boot. And so it wasn't.
Gosh,
it was
for the
not
novices. Tell them what these are, Keller. Tell for the people who have no clue what lineman spikes are.
So you have like, it's kind of like it's like this, and you stand on this part, and then there's like a spike right here. It's actually kind of very much like, this is a Bofang radio.
It's exactly what it is.
But
we'll get into that later.
It looks kind of like this, right? Your foot steps here in the arch of your foot, and then you have it's usually a leather or some kind of like Velcro strap that's, securely fastened to the spike, straps it to your boot, and then this part straps around your calf, and that goes on the inside. So then as you're climbing up the tree, you like stab this into the tree, and you take another step and stab it in the tree, and you have ropes and things like that to back you up. But needless to say, that was not the way that it was supposed to be. But I just ratchet strapped those things on tight and took off.
So Keller just
Hey,
goes and starts
ingenuity.
clearing.
All you need is a will.
That's it. Keller goes
Right?
out and starts clearing
Will
these
to do it.
trees, right? Like you spent like you just were going around basically.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't entirely philanthropic because this was Lynchburg at the time. This wasn't like a major disaster, but like
No, let's be real. It wasn't philanthropic. Like,
no,
at all.
no.
I
Keller
did,
was like,
I
I
did
bet
one
I could
day.
make,
I did
I bet I
one
could
day
make a couple
philanthropic
bucks.
stuff.
Yeah, he's like, I bet I could make a couple $100 if I go out and like, you know, with a chainsaw and try to clear out some of these driveways. And you did. You made enough money to go and buy more equipment.
Right. Yep.
Right.
And then I spent the next
3
year and a
years.
half
Yeah.
working like 60 to 70 hours a week outside. I had a part-time job and the tree job. And then I would stay up until about 1 or 2 o'clock every morning. I was literally putting about 4 hours of study in every night. And I would just watch YouTube videos of people like failing, about 45 minutes to an hour of people failing. And then like a couple hours of like dudes that there's like famous guys up there that post their stuff. It's really entertaining. You have like August Hunneke and there's like Guilty of Treason and a couple of other guys that are really entertaining to watch. But that's how I learned. It was kind of scary because like I didn't know what I didn't know, and honestly, I would not really encourage. God really protected me so much, like. But now I'm actually I'm a pretty good tree guy at this point.
This is the thing about Keller. I've known Keller since he was about 16, and we met when I was in college. His sister is our age. I went to school with her at Liberty.
You gonna tell that story?
I'm not going to tell the story that I started telling earlier because it's inappropriate. However, for this venue, I will say the thing I learned about Keller right off the bat, well, two things. One was Keller is permanently etched in my mind with the term prepping. And because you see, I grew up, as you guys know, I grew up on the mission field. So like surviving is part of life, and like doing things from scratch is part of life when you live in third world countries. But I had never heard of this concept of like preparing. And then, you know, one day Keller, who used to just come and hang out with his sister's friends, you know, when he was 16, 17, 18 years old, would come over and we'd have these big breakfasts, and we all like to shoot guns. And Keller would bring this arsenal up from Delaware. And this arsenal was not like normal things. Like I first learned about AR pistols from Keller and things like carbon 15s. And I got to hold my first Colt AR-15 and like all these very, expensive and rare guns and stuff. And I was like, Keller, why do you have all these? And he was like, do you remember Y2K? And I was like, yes, I do remember Y2K, Keller. I was like, I'm not sure if you were born yet, but I think you might have been at that point. But I remember it. And he was like, well, my dad was like super into Y2K. And I was like, I'm not seeing the connection here. So tell us about that. I want to know, like, remind us of the backstory of like how you got into this prepping thing through your family.
Oh boy. So my dad was actually not like, he wasn't really that into it. Like he was like, nah, this isn't going to happen. But then what he is he's like a guy who he's always like prepared for other stuff, right? Like he's always prepared for whenever he goes out to a job site. He has a big construction company up there and he always brings everything and he's always ready to go. And like, yeah. And so he all of a sudden got to about a month before, maybe 2 months before, which is totally me. But anyway, he got to like a month before and was like, man, like if something does happen, like I don't want to be the guy that like wasn't ready because like I am the guy that's always prepared. So he just freaking went out and like, I mean, he has a big company, so he had a decent amount of money and he just converted like, I mean, tons of money into gold, bought like an arsenal of like weapons and not just like goofy, weird weapons. They were like thought out. He got like subject matter experts. He was already friends with a bunch of special operator type guys and we would like go, I don't know if this was before. I think this was after this. He more connected with those kind of guys, and we'd like go build shoot houses and stuff like that, like dig them into like mountains and things. And but like he was getting connected with those guys, and so they pretty much like cued him into like Benelli and like Bushmaster and like all that kind of stuff. So he had like everything was consistent, and so I appreciate that. Like from the get go, it was like Glock and 5.56 mags and like just
because. The carbon 15
sponsors, by the way. If you're listening, let's go.
Because if I remember, that was like that had an impact on me because I remember thinking maybe this is wrong. Correct me. This is a long time ago when we had this conversation, but I think I remembered, your dad got the carbon fins for you and your brother because they were lighter and smaller, and you guys were still young, like you were still teenagers, right?
Yeah.
And was that right? Was that part of that fact?
Yeah, we all had our own. Yeah.
So that was kind of like the idea was like, oh, he didn't just think about like buying guns.
Well,
he thought like,
to clarify,
what kind of
we
guns
didn't
are my
have
kids
our
gonna
own.
have?
They were owned.
Correct. Correct.
By my dad.
They were your dad's.
his
But
guns.
what are my
They
children
were
going
just
to
ones that
use
we
well?
primarily borrowed.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. So that being said, it's clearly like a part of your growing up. So how do you think that's like affected you in your
I think
kind of where you're
I
at?
think that that's one of the, my dad and I don't have like the best relationship, but like I really do value a lot of things that I got from my dad. And that was one of them, is being prepared and, and doing like kind of being ready to do what it takes, and also not being like fantasizing about like what it's going to look like, actually being like realistic, like, all right, let's actually walk through this whole thing and see how that plays out. He was very like logical about that kind of stuff. And so like when I moved to California, I really wasn't like thinking like, oh, I'm like this big prepper, but it kind of started to dawn on me. I was like, man, like I'm married now. Like I need to be responsible for my wife and then like those around me. And, we lived in down in the city, and I was like, this is really nuts. Like if things got weird here, like if the power were to go down, like, there's not a lot of people that have a ton of extra food laying around. So people would be really, really, what's the word? Like
desperate,
stressed out. Yeah. Desperate is the word. And so I was just like, what's the big deal? I'll have a couple extra cans of gas and a few, jugs of water, because water's all like city, comes from the city. You can't like get out of a well, and it's dry as a bone out there. So, and then I, got a little bit extra food. I had a Glock and a shotgun, and I was like, all right, I'm good. And then
a Toyota pickup truck.
Yeah, buddy. Toyota pickup truck with a dirt bike rack on the back and a dirt bike on the back. So I could put,
that's right.
In about 10 minutes, I could have everything loaded. So that's like camping gear, about maybe a month or two worth of food, and like 20 gallons of water, and enough gas to drive like a couple hundred miles, basically.
So, okay, so this is even before you did. No. This is great. This is before before you started your tree business, before you'd come back to Lynchburg. So this is kind of my point with Keller, and he can talk more about this. Is this guy? He doesn't do anything halfway. Which when I was watching him at this phase, and I think all of us can kind of resonate with this. We've all kind of been in this situation. We're kindred spirits, but like everyone was waiting to see like what's Keller gonna settle into. Like, what is this guy going to do for work? Because when I met him, he was like, I'm going to go to school to be a nurse. And then he was like, I'm going to go into pharmaceutical sales. And then he's like, I'm going to go and do real estate development. And then I'm going to go and do, and everything he did, he was like,
not that great
10,
at.
like volume.
No.
Right. Well, no, it wasn't that he wasn't great at it. It's that you would lose focus because it wasn't fun and it wasn't engaging. Then all of a sudden one day it's like, why didn't we think of this sooner? Climbing trees and playing with chainsaws would be the thing that you would get hooked into. And
so, can I just say something about that? The only reason I actually legitimately changed my career 7 times, like from when I was married. So right before I was married, I was a pipe fusion specialist, like fusing up the entire gas line for a prison. Okay. And then like, as I got married, I was in merchant services and then investment advising with Caleb. And then I went out there and that kind of like didn't work. So then I became a real estate agent out in California and I became a property manager. I did property management for like 3 years out there, and then like got burned out of that and came back here. We had a kid, so we didn't want to raise them out in California. Come back to Lynchburg. Okay. So then I bought some real estate here because I'd saved. When you live in a really expensive place, a lot of people are like, oh, it's so expensive. It's like, well, live way below your means and then you save double. If you make double and it costs double, you can usually save double. So then we came back here where cost of living is cheaper. We bought some, pretty garbage rental properties and learned some lessons and stuff, and then kind of slowly pivoted to other stuff. But here's the thing. I was able to do all of that because I had no college debt.
Amen.
Yeah.
So like, I had no college debt and nothing like strapping me down. Like, oh, I've already spent 4 years prepping for this. I have to stick with this career. Or like, oh, I'm already this far. I have to go to med school. Like, I had none of that. And I was able to just kind of keep testing the water and figure out like what I wanted to do. And that has worked for me. And I think I wish more people have the permission to go do that, as opposed to feeling like they have to go to school or they have to do whatever. It's like there's so many different things to do out there. don't get pigeonholed by some college or instructor person that's like, a counselor that wants you to do just whatever's on one sheet of paper. Like there's so many things to do. Just find somebody that's
Well, I
doing
think
what you want and follow them.
what's an interesting thing is just going from career to career to career. Like you had the benefit of being able to try things out and realize, man, this isn't for me. There's so many things I think that, gosh, it's just so necessary. I think for my kids, one of the things that I want to focus on is get them to understand what they're passionate about, get them to understand what they want to put their efforts into so that we could really focus on that.
100%.
But I think, just like with everything, letting my kids fail, letting my kids go after something and training them to adapt and say, like, this is, if I don't succeed at this, or if I find that this is too quickly a burnout, I can move to something else and not be like strapped down to anything. Because the reality is, it's like, the question is, the past generations have been like, it's an obligatory thing to go to college. And sometimes it's like, you know what, we don't necessarily need to go to college for plumbing.
Absolutely.
Or for, pipe patching or, or for some of these other types of jobs, right?
A lot
for way sexier things than that, like real estate investing.
Well, and that's the cool thing. You got to really jump around, and then you kind of came back and be like, look, I could totally make my way doing this. It's something that you can make money off of. It's also something that you could do, just Christian missions work with and utilizing those skills.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's a really cool kind of skill set to have, to kind of be able to move on. It's just being like the heart of an entrepreneur, just saying like, I'm going to make it by. I think that was the biggest, one of the studies that was done by Harvard, is one of the secrets to a successful business is perseverance. Like, you don't literally, just perseverance will make you successful. As long as you have a somewhat decent product.
This one guy who, it's funny, like, you have these random conversations with people and then it has this massive effect on you. I was in Canada. It was after Leanna's wedding, and I met this super cool guy, and he was like, had this really swanky job and, suit and tie and all that stuff. He'd definitely gone to school. And I was in the throes of like trying to decide, like, am I going to keep going to school or am I going to whatever? Cause I like gone for like a semester. And then I was sitting out there telling him, I'm like, yeah, but like, am I going to be able to make it? And he was just like, bro, you live in a land of plenty. He's like, you will always be able to put food on the table. He's like, if you just grind, it doesn't matter whether you have a degree or not, you will be able to make it. And I was like,
it's very true.
Sick.
Yeah.
And that was like coming from this guy that was like, I mean, he had like, a nice apartment way up in the sky somewhere. And like, I was like, okay, cool. So that guy kind of that was like one of different conversations that kind of gave me permission. But sorry, we're kind of covering a whole bunch of stuff, but that's sort of building into who I am.
Yeah, so basically with the chainsaw business, you have lots of opportunities for natural disasters. You were in Helene. You want to talk a little bit about that, what you saw there, what you experienced, and kind of some of the stuff that was going on there that you did?
Yeah. Well, before we touch on Helene, let me maybe touch one more thing on kind of like this sort of mindset and like capability thing. I think that what I've come to kind of figure out, living in California was a really interesting experience because you're with a bunch of people who have been raised. They're ahead, right? New York and California, they usually do everything like early, and then we kind of catch up, like in the inner, like in the rural areas. And so what was interesting was going out there and seeing like, oh snap, like these are like 28-year-olds that have been raised by iPads and daycare, and seeing like what kind of hands-off parenting, both parents working, the results of that. Because here, that's like not as common. That's slow. That's like kind of like a gaining steam sort of thing. And you see it like in the young people that me and Christina kind of mentor, like all of these girls like are thinking, yeah, I'm supposed to go get this career. And then they hang out with like us and our kids and they're like, this is awesome. And they really want to be doing that, but that's a whole nother conversation. Anyway,
whole nother episode.
Guys,
but
that's good.
But let me just finish that. What I'm trying to say is that those guys like just didn't have, they were 28 and like, at 13 or 14, the parents had only spent so little time with them. They were still trying to kind of do Santa Claus.
Yep.
So then all of a sudden they want them to be a man at 18 and it's just not happening. So then they kind of like perpetually stay at home and or like find something that's kind of chill to do, that's just sort of like, they skate by and their parents pay for all their bills and stuff. And so like we were like, oh my gosh, like when that rocks you, when you come from kind of like this the background you and I had where we traveled a ton and like just have done a bunch of different things and have like built skills from that. And then you sort of interact with people that just have like no skills. You're like, man, like this is going to be a problem, right? Because if you don't even know how to change a tire, how are you going to go be a missionary in Africa where you pretty much have to be a full-time mechanic? Like you have to be a mechanic, to like.
That's the cool part. You don't.
Right?
Like, no, but Keller, your point is dead on, because that's exactly the issue. Is it's eye opening, and it starts to. And I think what I hear you saying too is it's these kinds of situations where you spend your time with a group of people. We were very blessed in Lynchburg coming into college to do like that group of people we had were very worldly, not in a like spiritual sense, but in a like experienced sense. We had people who had done a lot in their 20s, like people who had done so much. And then when you're hanging out with people like Nick Liberto and Caleb Matson and Dave Marcus and me and Charles, like when you're hanging out with guys like that, you're like, oh yeah, okay, so this is pretty normal. Like you go to
did
third
you just
world
rub two
countries,
sticks together and make fire?
yeah, exactly. Like you're living in the backyard for that's a thing you do, or like, hey, you're just
right.
You do those kinds of things and you don't think anything of it, and then you go to the rest of America, and to your point, the West Coast or the cities in where they are 10 years ahead of the flyover states in terms of postmodernism and the effects of that. And all of a sudden you realize like, whoa. And that gets to the point of like, yeah, because it's about, I think this is something that you deeply resonate with, and I think we all here do, is that, and I think this is important for men in general, which is we want that red dawn existence. We want to wake up in the morning,
probably,
and be the right man at the right time, right? That's what we want. Every man wants to be needed. That's what I want.
But the other part of the Red Dawn thing, where everyone dies and dies of like dysentery,
nobody wants that. Yeah, nobody wants that, especially once you have kids.
I don't know how many people realize that that's also what they would be getting.
Trust me, no, you're absolutely right. That's the other side of the spectrum, right? And then so it's tempered, right? But this is what's important, is that, and I think this is why I was so glad when you like really took off with the tree business, because like for me, when I looked at like the stuff that you were passionate about and stuff that you were good at, is that like you can't be held down. Like you can't have some boss that you got to go ask permission. You want to be able to see a news story kicking off, hey, this big storm's coming in, and you want to be able to like, I loved getting text messages from you like, hey, I'm loading up a trailer, like, hey, I've got this, what else do I need? Or like, hey, do you think these guys are here? Hey, do you know anyone who's in this file? Like
thanks for hooking it up.
Dude, always. But if you're trying to be the person who can go and execute, like that's not something that happens on accident. You have to be deliberate in your life choices to create that kind of flexibility. And not all of us get the privilege of being able to be in a position to do that in different spheres of influence, right? But like for you, I think that's something that you're uniquely, like God has blessed you with. And I think it's because he knows you, and he knows your heart, and he knows your personality. And I think it's a tremendous amount of grace that God has given, that you get to be in a position to do that, because it's hard to fight.
That's true. I also think that if more people, like even kind of like me being able to test all the waters and figure out like, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. I felt like a failure for a long time, because I was just like, I just suck at everything. Or like, I guess I'm just not, do I have what it takes? Because like,
You're
never
not
really
making
put
progress.
Yeah, well, like, or I was like, I would realize that, like, I really didn't put in the effort that I needed to, right? So I'd be like, do I really have what it takes? And then finally, like, I found something, and I was like, I'm going to grind on this thing. I grinded as hard as I could. I think that if more people even just had the realization that, like, hey, there is another option out there. I mean, dude, when I started the tree business, I was working at a cell phone store selling cell phones, like, for like $15 an hour. Okay. So like, and then everyone else just clocked in and then like went home, right? But like I was waking up early in the morning, going out and like cutting down stuff first thing in the morning, and then literally I would hose down in people's backyards, throw on a different shirt, and then race to work and get there. Like, ask my boss. I was always late. Roy was like, I mean, like he would have fired anybody else. He was so like he would like, and he'd be like, okay, Can't feel it again.
This is the last time, I swear, Keller. Be like, yeah, totally the last time.
I'm
Keller,
sorry. Let's
It's
just,
like comb your hair.
Side
You've got
quest.
some Douglas firs stuck in it.
Side quest.
Oh,
You guys
man.
remember my old house on Acres Court?
Oh, you mean
the
like
giant pine
Yeah, that's-
tree
I'm sorry,
that
I
used to
wasn't
be on
talking
the
about
side
right
of my
now.
house. All right. We had a bad after that tornado, and we had one of these branches that was dangling over, and I saw that Keller had been
I
like,
remember that.
Keller had been making some progress. Like he was so excited. He was always like, "Oh yeah, I got this," and he'd come by, and every time I saw him, he had like more orange stuff in his car. All right, like he had bought like it'd be like new still helmets or like new chainsaw or something like that, and it was great because he was paying for it with the money he was earning. And I'm like, dude, he's really taking off with this. So I'm like, hey man, come help me cut down this tree. I'll pay you $500, and we'll cut down this this giant pine tree. Dude, we spent like a week cutting down this tree because and Keller knew what he was doing, but like but like not really. And we got this, and I'm telling you, this tree is like I don't know how big it was. You tell me, but it was huge, and it took
it
us
was pretty big.
quite a bit of work.
But
Yeah.
do you know how long it would take me to do that tree now?
Yeah, like 10 minutes. Like
2 hours.
No
I don't know.
joke. No joke. It would
I
probably
believe that.
take me 20 minutes.
that's amazing.
Wow.
Took
Get
us like
it
a
on the
week.
ground.
Yeah.
It's so
It
fun.
was
That's
a week.
awesome.
Sorry, we're all
So-
over the place.
No, this is good.
Okay, good. So we moved back here, and then we just started like connecting with college kids and stuff like that. And we've really like my brother and I, because my brother went to Buds twice, and that sucked. And then he came back, and
He didn't want to listen.
It sucked twice.
I told him so many times, nobody wants to listen to Josh. There's the moral there.
hey, Josh, you know as well as about anybody, sometimes you just got to try stuff for yourself.
Hey, I agree, man. I agree. Hey, now he's
Well,
But
if,
anyway,
now
if
he's
it sucked
stronger.
the first time and you didn't want to do it the first time, I can't imagine going through Buds a second time and saying,
Yeah.
maybe it'll be different this time
well,
around.
well, no, like anyways,
Man.
you're in a
we'll
Keep
get
going.
going on
Love the
another
story.
time.
We'll
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So he comes back, and I think it was kind of cool because we started connecting with other college kids and feeling like, man, like there really is this lack of like skills and lack of just experience in manly kind of stuff that gives people this confidence that like, hey, I have what it takes. Like I can go out there and do something. And so what he was finding, because he was going to all these Bible studies, trying to find a wife, and which is
Excellent strategy.
That's
I'm
another
telling God about this.
episode
Approved.
that we did.
yeah. And so he was finding that like all these
That's
guys
great.
are just lack a lot. Everybody really, all these college kids, they're all just like, I don't know what to do, and so I'm just gonna go back for my master's. And so we've kind of gotten really passionate recently about like, hey, we just need to connect with more college age kids and try to show them what it looks like to be a family, like to have a family,
That's it.
to have a business, to run that well, to like to be about the mission, like just daily. Like I'm a missionary, but I like have a tree service business, right? There's missionaries in, I don't know, like pretty much all over the world that have like bookstores or just do, I don't know, they have like business. I'm a big fan of like doing business in missions as opposed to just being like, well, I guess I'll just go raise
Yeah.
10 grand a month and then go like hang out in an island somewhere, right? Like not a big fan. But
We have a whole
Yeah.
episode on that. Go check it out.
did
Sam.
you? Oh, I think I listened to that one maybe. But anyway, so that's where we've been, and so that's what I'm trying to do is basically like be consistent about like, hey, if I'm gonna walk the walk, I gotta walk it, right? So if I'm gonna talk the talk, I gotta walk the walk. That's it. But yeah, so it's about like, all right, what skill sets do I need to develop so that I can go out and do better and be efficient, right? Like I always talk about the parable of the talents, right? Like God gave these talents, and he was like, hey, like do something with that. Don't just bury it. Don't just sit on the couch and like scroll. Okay, double it. Go take those talents and make more, whether it's money or actual like. It's kind of funny that it's kind of rhymes with talent, but yeah, like expand your ability. If you don't know how to change a tire, go find somebody to learn how to change a tire. If you don't know how to run a chainsaw, go learn how to run a chainsaw. Learn how to frame. Do stuff that's helpful, because then in these situations, whether it's dropped in your lap, like there's a natural disaster right here, and all of a sudden you're like, oh man, there's an old lady like trapped in a car, like under a tree, and I don't have a chainsaw and I don't know how to use a chainsaw. Like if you can develop those skills as a godly man, I think that we really need to think about, like, rather than being like, oh, like what's the next activity that I'm going to do, or what's the next thing I'm going to buy, like be like, what can I do that like that expands my ability for the kingdom and grows my community in that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think oftentimes the American church at least gets put into this comfort zone of, as long as I'm giving money to my church, I'm essentially sponsoring a missionary, or I'm giving out and I'm paying somebody else to do evangelism, or I'm paying somebody else to reach my community. When the reality of the structure of the gospel is to, like what you said, is go into all the world making disciples, and it's not a pay for somebody to go into do all the world, but to do it to yourself, or do it for yourself. And so I think that anything that, because we've all been given, the body of Christ has all been given gifts, right? And we've all each been given, but that doesn't, here's the thing, it doesn't mean that we're limited to these gifts.
Those
we
things.
don't get to say, oh, well, because I don't know how to work a chainsaw and I have been gifted with outdoorsmanship, then therefore I don't have to do that. No, there's some pretty baseline things that we need to be able to, maybe I'm not the best at it, but I need to know a baseline of it, right? I don't ever use algebra, but I had to learn it in school. It's just, dude, you have to kind of put yourself into a position where you're able to contribute.
Dude, have you seen the TikTok memes on the acronym FARM, and it's about dads raising their kids?
No, I have
FARM
not.
stands for Fathers Against Raising Morons, and it
I
does
love
stuff
that.
like this.
I love that.
Where it's like changing tires, framing walls, basic plumbing.
Those are great.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I love.
It's serious.
Keller, this is something I hear you saying, and I want to zoom in on this because I think this is really important, and this speaks a lot. I've seen this in just what we talk about in the last couple years, especially in you, is you have always been capable. Like, you've always been a capable human being, or like you have always been able to do things. Like, I know you might have had some like internal, inferiority complex of saying like, oh, hey, I'm not good enough, or I'm not good at this, or I'm not progressing fast enough, or whatever. But like, dude, you've always been able to, build something or break something down. Or like, if I had a physical problem that I needed to deal with, like I could call you or Dave Marcus, and I know that I'm going to get that situation sorted out. Right. But and you were always good.
That's a huge compliment. I appreciate that.
No, I mean that, but you also have always been good, and you've always been good at chasing that dopamine of getting better at that, because I feel like that's been your comfort zone. And it's not that you didn't love Jesus or that you weren't passionate about the gospel. You always have been. But what I've seen in you now, and what I hear you saying, is, especially in the last couple of years, is that part of your preparedness effectively has been like, hey, where I'm not as developed in this stage of life is like how I'm bringing, like how I need to bring other young men along. There's harvest to be had here, and that requires an entirely different skill set, right? A new set of skills, a new set of focus that you've had to kind of invest in. I mean, when I was in Lynchburg last year, not this year, but when I was there last year, I know you were like, hey man, we got this property, we're doing this Bible study, we're bringing guys up early and this is at like 5:30 in the morning. I'm jet lagged coming over from Europe, and Keller's like, yeah, we're already up here at the mountain, like come on up. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen that, so I feel like I wanted to zoom in on the fact that, like, I hear you saying like there's this physical aspect and these physical skills and these tangible things that we can do to be helpful, but they're married to the kingdom skills. Like Jesus said, like he went and found fishermen, guys who were raised in a culture where they were taught to use their hands. They were taught a trade. They were useful human beings, right? Yeah. And God says, hey, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Unfortunately 100%. For us, we have to both teach people to fish and make them fishers of men. That's basically what I'm hearing you tell us.
Okay. And I want to segue that into something that I think I want to make sure that we're careful not to do. And that's, like, because if you and I get together and Nick and whatever, we like start to geek out about this stuff. And it's sort of, it can sound to someone who's an outsider, or like to myself even a few years ago, because I'm definitely further along today than I was even 2 years ago in my kind of like, I'm not like a bunker gas, no offense to gas masks are good, but like, I'm not like one of these guys that's like super like, tinfoil hat, like prepper kind of guy. I'm like a dad that I feel like I think I want to imagine that I'd be okay like 100 years ago, right? That's kind of more like what I'm trying to be more prepared. Like, just like, if you watch that movie Seven Brides or Seven Brothers, have you remember that movie? Well, then the oldest brother, he's like, oh, I'm gonna
deep
go
throwback for the 18 to 25 set.
Say.
You might want to lay that.
he's like, oh, I'm gonna go back to the woods cabin. It's got like 6 months of supplies up there. It's like that was just totally common. But like
Thing
now,
that
like
you
oh,
would do.
never be like
Yeah.
no, like almost no one. Anyways, sorry. What I'm trying to say is, I don't want the guys that are like, she's like, I didn't travel and live in China, and I haven't like done this, and I don't know how to use a chainsaw. Like these guys are just like trying to basically sound like they're so much cooler than me, and I don't really like. This is kind of annoying, right, to hear. I don't want anyone to think that. What I'm trying to tell you is that like a few years ago, I barely knew how to use a chainsaw, and then I like either found people or went online and like found like how to be able to do that, right? And then and this and like that's just a skill. If I want to be a better dad, I have found men that I'm like, I like how he treats his wife and how his kids act with him. So I'm going to start asking him questions like, how did you get there? So like, that's what it looks like. I had a young person come, like we were like talking to this girl and we were like, hey, so like, have you found like mentors? And she was like, well, I kind of feel like, it's weird because like, I feel like I shouldn't be going up to ask them to be my mentor. And I was just like, that's exactly what you should be doing. So like, if there's people out there that are hearing these prepper conversations and they think we're just trying to like boast about like how manly we think we are, no, like what we're trying to say is that like it's out there. You just need to like go out and get it. So like go to your church and find, like if someone came up to me in church and was like, hey, listen, like I'm not trying to like start a business to compete with you necessarily, but like I just want to know how to do that just in case, right? I would be like, yo, come out and I will teach you, right? I would do that like for free, 100%.
Well,
Anyways,
Kelly, this is a good question because here's the real thing. It's like, it's good. Like the way that God's designed us, like I guess the point that I'm getting at, and one of the things I'd love for you to answer is it feels good to be useful because that's how God designed us. So
totally.
like I guess the question is like what makes somebody seek out going into disaster areas? Like why do you keep doing that? Now there's the pat answer, and it's not pat because it's a real thing. Like, hey, I want to be helpful and I want to, and this, what does God expect of us? And I have the ability and maybe I do, but tell, like, even beyond that, like, why go do that? And
Perfect
what is
question.
that like?
Excellent. That is the perfect question to actually get us into like the Helene stuff. And I will answer that. What? So there's a couple different ways that you can go and help, okay? You can go as like a solo dude, right? And I did that. Well, so I've done it a couple different ways. And me, like I care a lot about efficiency, right? I can go and get a lot of jobs done if I just go with me and my crew and we rock and roll jobs. That's not reaching people for Jesus. Okay. I can go and work under a Catholic organization that pays me and covers more of my costs. I could stay longer. And nothing against the Catholics, but like it
They're wrong.
it right.
Sorry.
But
Listen,
still,
folks, we got to stay on brand. Go ahead.
but my point is I wasn't there like trying to get a priest to come out and like talk to anybody, right? We were just, it just so happened that it was a Catholic organization that was willing to send us some money and we got like requested through the grapevine to like come down and help them. But I kind of got bummed while I was there because I was like, man, this is not the same. This isn't the same as going with Samaritans or with, like another group similar to Samaritans. Like, when you go out with Samaritans, there's a lot of things that are awesome. The primary thing is it's all about the gospel. Like they have like a chaplain that goes with every team. They have a team leader. They have, yeah. So, and like the chaplains are trained in like trauma response or whatever. Cause these people, a lot of them, I mean, gotta imagine your house that you've put a lot of money and effort and energy and heart into, and it is just demolished. And everything you have, like photo albums and kids' teddies and like, I mean, everything. It's just like demolished. And a lot of times the kids are off already. They're at somebody else's house somewhere or whatever. But like mom or dad or some of the family are kind of there, and they're just like having to like keep it together. And they're like breathing through like, okay, and all of a sudden this sea of like 100 or more orange shirts shows up, and there's like a blue shirt there, and they're just standing there with their arm around them, and they're just like, hey, like, like we're here because Jesus loves you, and that's literally, none of these people are getting paid. They're all just here because they want to show Christ's love. And so we roll up in there and do all this work. And then these people are just like, I mean, it's crazy to see like them experience in real time like the love of Christ when they just feel like they basically experienced like, I don't know, something opposite. It's like, what, does God hate me? You know what I mean? Like, why did I just get? And it's like, well, this world is messed up. It's all full of corruption and pollution and, you know, evil. And so, you know, but like God is there. Like God is in the midst and he's here. And so yeah, dude, it's 100% about like the gospel. And if it means that I don't get quite as many jobs done, or I don't, you know, I'm not quite as efficient, like it's I've done enough deployments different ways that I would rather be with SP. But go ahead, good. And I have another one after that, but go ahead.
I was going to say, well, generally when it comes to the mission, is it's not just the task, it's the people as well, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, if you go and you just do the task and you neglect the people, that hurt is still there.
Yeah.
You know, a ministry of presence is important. You can't just go and say, oh, your house was demolished, let me go and take the tree off of it and then peace out, I'm gone. That's not really, I mean, maybe you're fixing the immediate physical need, but you're not fixing the emotional need
100%.
with it. There's something to be said about...
Or the soul, the soul need.
Well, you know what's interesting is I think of it like when you're in a point where you've hit rock bottom and you are feeling kind of abandoned. There's something so powerful about somebody just being there to help, to say that they care, or that they're there to bring comfort and bring like it's something that is so amazing, not just for the person receiving it, but also for the missionaries from Samaritan's Purse or whatever organization kind of going into. I remember in Lynchburg there was God's Pit Crew that would go around anytime there was a hurricane. And they would just go through, and you just remember, like, I just remember like driving with, was with ITG at the time. We would go through, there was a tornado hit, and I'd see these people just pull up out of nowhere. Before it seemed like even the police officers were there, and they're cutting down trees, and they're meeting the needs of people, and they're raising money for, you know, the families. And I mean, this is the kind of thing when we're talking about loving our neighbor as ourself. And
100%.
there's something to be said about the polarization and the divisive culture that we have in the United States. But you know what? You know what brings people over to the gospel is when they're desperate, when they're hurting, and they have the love of God that is essentially just is able to wrap their arms around them and say, "Hey, come. Here's a better way. Come join the community." By the way,
if you're looking for some solid mentors, that's a great place to start. You show up to like for a day of worker, or you get lined up for an overnight. It's even better. And you go to SP. It's a bunch of like guys like, you know, I mean, there's younger guys too, but like guys like my age and then up, like 50, you know, 40, 50, 60, 70-year-olds. These guys that have like figured out life. They're not just like checked out on some beach in Florida somewhere. These guys are like, some of these guys go from disaster to disaster. I know Dean Cotton, bro. It's my man. Dean's like, I don't know, he's getting pretty old, but he went out and just bought his own lift, like a man lift. Like after working with us, like he had never really, I don't know if he'd really done much tree work before, but he like, we had a blast working with him out in Iowa. And so now he just travels around and he'll spend like weeks at a time, and his wife will work in the kitchen, you know, prepping food for everybody. And it'll be like, but,
Keller, I got a question for you. So when you just described how that wave of orange crashes into somebody in distress, bro, I'm not gonna lie, I started tearing up a little bit inside, and I was like, if you kept going, you would have gotten me. And so, dude, I didn't know that Samaritan's Purse had a chainsaw crew. I feel like in our world there are natural disasters that keep happening. So if I'm listening right now, right, like we're talking about earlier about skill acquisition, to be a man, a Christian man today, you want to not settle into the status quo. You don't want to be like the New York boys, the Cali boys that were raised on iPads and babysitters and have no ability to change a tire, right? Like,
and
you want to be men.
If you were that,
no. No dogs on it. Yeah,
yep.
Like
I had a buddy recently. You're where if you're that guy, that's no problem. You're just right here, and you need to make incremental changes and find the people that will get you.
Don't ever settle.
You can get way over here like pretty quick. You just have to choose it.
So in that path of us pursuing skills so that we can bless those around us for the kingdom. Tell us more about the motivation you have as a Christian man and why you do keep going to these natural disaster places. Because I want to, like, part of me is like, yo, recruit me next time you're going. Like, I'm in. Like,
Yeah.
this is something that I think as a heart posture, anyone listening, whether it's a natural disaster or not, right? Like, if you see a need, we are Christian men. We meet needs. That's what we do.
Yeah.
Yes.
I totally agree with that. And Keller, I want to hear that because that's exactly what. Just like I want to double click Nick's saying before Keller goes. All right, we're gonna double click. But that's exactly what we're called to do. I mean, the reason the church grew, and I've said this before, but just from like the biblical, like church history standpoint, you listen to this podcast, maybe you don't know, but like, dude, the church went from being 12 dudes in Jesus to the religion of the Holy Roman Empire in 2 years because the church met needs that nobody else was meeting. Like, that's what they did. People knew, and I've said this before on the podcast, we've talked about it, like they knew that the Christians would show up. They knew that the Christians would help them. They knew that the Christians would take care of the orphans. Jesus himself said, what is true religion? Take care of widows and orphans. Like, that is what we're called to do. So Keller,
when Paul went and talked with the council, and they said, "All right, that's fine. Go and preach the gospel to the Gentiles. Just don't neglect the poor." And he's like, "That's what I've been wanting to do in the first place." Yeah, that's so great, man. Yeah. But yeah, tell us what you were gonna say.
So I'm just gonna touch on it one more time. It's a lot easier to do that when you don't have college debt. So just
financial literacy.
Totally clear.
Right.
You're not wrong.
If you do have college debt, then there's this thing called Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. Go through that and freaking like get your life in order. But if your kid is about to go to school and or somebody is about to go to school and they don't really know what they're going to go for, then like
maybe
there are so many other options. So that's just what I want to make sure that is clear, because it is a lot harder. Like, I have friends that have commitments and they've got to keep this job because like. And so, like, I'll hit them up and be like, hey, let's go. And they're like, next time. And it's like, man, like, if you weren't so bound by, like, all your payments and all this and all your services handcuffs and all that. Yeah, dude, like, figure out your finances so that you can then go and be able to have the freedom to do all this, like, awesome, fun, and exciting and hard and challenging stuff, right? Anyways, so what skills? So first of all, obviously, like, you can tell, like, it's not just, like, there's a ton of tree services in town, right? And like, it's not gonna be the same thing. Like, if they go down and go just do tree work, like you have to know Jesus and like, and understand like what he's done for you. Right. So that would be like the first skill. Cause my wife's always giving me a hard time because I kind of gloss past some of the stuff that I feel like a lot of people are getting pretty well. As far as I can tell, right? There's tons of people in here at church that seem very authentic. They love the Lord and but they just don't know anything beyond like this very like, I don't know, fashion-y, like Christian lifestyle.
Consumerism. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Something. Yeah. I don't know. Cause I'm not in their life. I don't really know exactly, but like, I just know that like,
it's okay.
Definitely everyone here is very like stylish, and it's like that costs a lot of money. Like Millen's joked. So Millen shows up to my little brother Millen. He shows up to like he'll go to a different Bible study every night, and like
is he single? Is that why?
That's a solid strategy here in this town, and hopefully not. But anyway, he has
it's
actually
on the hunt for Jesus and a wife.
Yeah. Well, he's put it on pause because he's kind of chasing one down right now. She's pretty awesome, But anyways, he would go to these Bible studies, and somebody finally asked him, like, do you have another pair of shoes?
Dude, that's a Finhouse remark if I've ever heard one.
I think
like all of us wore like one outfit.
And like these 0 shoes right here.
Yeah,
that's literally That's and it was funny. He was like, well, how many pairs of shoes do you have? He was like, I don't know, probably like 25. That was like kind of like the average. Like these kids have like 15 to 30 shoes, and it's like, dude, if you didn't have all those shoes and you had a 20-year-old car and you made some other decisions, like you'd really have some options. Like,
dude, Keller, that's you gotta. Here's the thing, though. This is a big point that you're making. I want to hit this. Is that they don't do that though because they've never experienced what it's like to have that kind of flexibility and freedom.
Yeah.
And to kind of like land the plane here, this is
Somebody's
really,
got to tell them.
That's what it comes down to. And here's what I'm hearing from you.
Sorry, guys.
And we're going to do a whole nother episode with Keller because there's so much to talk about. And because we've spent, and it's been wonderful, and you've hit the core stuff. This is what's amazing. But like the core of the issue is like, hey man, seek first the kingdom, right? And everything else comes after, right?
Yeah.
But seek first the kingdom. And we all have a place to go in that. But here's the issue. Young men don't act right because they haven't been given those good examples. So listen, if you're listening to this and you're a young Christian man or woman and you were raised in a God-fearing household by a parent who taught you, and you're sitting here and you're shaking your head and be like, yeah, this is all stuff I do and this is fantastic. Like, let me explain something to you. If you think you will stand before Jesus one day and not give an account for what you did with that, because guess what? Not everybody gets that. And from, that's reality. Like, not everybody got that. And so, like, what are you doing with it? Because I was that kid who grew up in the mission field, and I had this stupid, naive picture in my head that was like, I've done my time. What?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah.
Like, no, I've been equipped to go do more.
Yeah, or that almost equally bad is that like, well, I don't want to do, this because it's not as big or it's not as cool. So I'm going to
get over that.
prep.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go do this more extreme, like special operations type missionary. I'm going to be a missionary like Josh and now, in the middle of like dangerous China. No. That's what I'm going to do. And it's like, no,
do anything.
Yeah. You are a missionary, like at your work
where you are
right now.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah, and so
no, you're Keller. No, you're totally cool. We gotta land it, but listen, this is exactly it. Be where you're at. Get your eyes off the horizon. Get your eyes on your feet where God's planted you. Do much with what He's given you, and then more will come, and it'll be more than you're ready for.
Right.
It'll be so much more than you're ready for that you will be desperately clinging for mentorship and guidance to do well with what He's given you. And the greater you do with that, man, the more you're going to, that is the growth trajectory. That is the way that God has designed it. That's what we read in scripture. That's what men who have been following Jesus for a long time have all said. We don't have to guess. It's been written down in more books than I have time to read or any of you do. But that's the big takeaway here. So Keller, thank you, my friend, for being on with us today.
Also, one more thing the Bible says is it does say go be fruitful and multiply. And I know that's like kind of laughed at, or that's like
procreate.
That's always kind of like pulled out of the hat as like, one more thing but like, I'm just going to say like genuinely, like that is like in there. Right. And
Dude, last episode, I said we'll take one for the team. I'm telling God about this.
That's right.
We're going to do a whole episode on that.
Yeah. And I'm just saying that like that, I would say that like there's been a few things in all of our lives that have been probably the most impactful, growing, and joyful experience.
Sanctifying.
It would probably be like, sanctifying, right? But it would be like getting saved and then like kind of growing in our faith and challenges like that. And then it would be probably like getting married and having kids. And
100%.
Like, you would not say the same thing about your career. There's no way.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Well, if you stayed with us this long,
thank you.
Keller, you rock. We will have you
like
on again
and subscribe.
Soon.
Hey,
yes, like
if
and
you guys
subscribe. Leave a comment below.
If you have me back,
do you want to plug your business? Do you have any? Where can people find you if they want a tree cut down?
Well,
got Instagram, got those socials.
I do actually.
Well, we can link them.
We'll add them in the description.
I don't post much anymore, and I think coming this new year, I'm probably going to switch to a flip phone.
All right.
Nice.
Well, in that case, never mind.
But you can totally check it out. I'll still have my secretary posting every now and then. So yeah, and there's some cool stuff that's on there already, actually. I used to post a ton. It's called, it's alto_tree_service on Instagram.
All right. Well, thanks, Keller.
All right, guys, this has been another episode of I'm Telling God About This podcast. Like and subscribe. We will see you next time.